what is your favorite unplayable deck of all time?
Your Magispector.
Witchcrafters.
Layer of Darkness.
Charmers. Pure Destiny Heroes.
Monarchs.
Gravekeepers.
Gravekeepers.
Firefist.
Eldwolf.
Yangzings.
Hyper Chaos. I will tell you I have a favorite unplayable garbage deck, but that would be a lie. All my decks are insane, baby. Let's go.
What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and welcome to the long-awaited episode 2 of our Make It Meta series. Yeah, I know it's been like 3 months since the last episode, but these videos are a lot harder to produce than I thought they would be. I'm working on streamlining the process, so hopefully episode 3 isn't that far around the corner. Now, because it's been so long, we're going to do a quick recap of the rules, just because, again, it's been 3 months, and maybe some of you are new, so there are 2 main rules for Make It Meta. Rule number 1 is that we are able to create 3 brand new card types for the archetype in question, and those card types are allowed to be anything that exists within the game already. We're not making new card types, just new support. So within the bounds of what already exists, we can pretty much make anything we want. And rule number 2 is that the cards obviously have to be realistic and fair and balanced. Obviously, we can't just give every deck a win condition that just says activate this card to win the game, because then it's just not any fun. Nobody's going to enjoy that. So the cards that we create have to be something that actually have the possibility of existing within the parameters of the game already. Now, with that being said, if you don't already know from the title, the thumbnail, and the cards that I just held up, episode 2 is all about Charmers. Now, Charmers are a cool deck, and I'm lumping them together with the familiar Possessed cards because they realistically are the same archetype, and suggested by not only MCole40, as you saw in the intro, but also my wife, because this is her actual favorite deck of all time, definitely had to make sure that this was episode 2. And when I think Charmers, I think all the way back to 2015, maybe 2014, when Secrets of Eternity came out and gave us the trap card Unpossessed. At that point in the game, Charmers were a XYZ deck. Links had not yet existed, so even though there are quite a few Charmer Link monsters, I decided to go and make this deck an XYZ deck, and that actually worked out perfectly because there is another relevant XYZ deck in this format, Kashtira. So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and introduce you to the 3 brand new support cards that we made for the Charmer archetype. Again, I did decide to go a more XYZ based route, and then we'll go ahead and get into the live duels and see whether or not Charmers can beat the meta. The first brand new support card that we gave Charmers is actually going to be the XYZ monster that we made, Familiar's Possessed, and its effect reads as such. 2+ level 4 monsters, including a spellcaster type monster. You can also XYZ summon Familiar's Possessed by using a Charmer Link monster and any monster it points to as material, regardless of level. You can use the following effect of Familiar's Possessed a number of times per turn, equal to the number of different attributes used for its summon. You can detach 1 material from this card, add 1 monster with 1500 attack or defense from your deck to your hand, but for the rest of this turn, you cannot add monsters with the same name with this effect. You cannot link summon except Charmer Link monsters the turn you activate this effect. A Charmer Link monster made using this card as material can also target monsters in your graveyard when activating its effect. Now, there are 3 main discussion points that I want to bring up when talking about Familiar's Possessed, and the first is going to be its alternative summoning condition. By making it able to be summoned using a Charmer Link monster and any monster it points to, that adds a little bit of much needed utility to the already existing Charmer Links. By making the Charmer Link monsters and stealing a monster from your opponent's graveyard, you can then overlay those into Familiar's Possessed, and at the very bare minimum, since they are the same attribute, that will give you a single search. And I think that that added utility was definitely needed for the links that already exist, because at the moment they really don't do too much unless you're summoning out a powerhouse monster. Point number 2 is going to be the ability to search multiple times as long as you use multiple attributes in order to make this card, and the reason that's important is because it makes summoning rank 4s a much easier process. Rank 4s, as you might know, have been ridiculously power crept in the later years, and when they once were the strongest toolbox, they really now can't do all too much. So by being able to get multiple searches, we can search multiple of the familiars, and that will let us get at least 1, if not multiple rank 4s out on the board at once. And the final talking point that I would like to bring up is that this card allows for recursion with the Charmer Link monsters. By giving the Link monsters the effect to be able to summon from your own graveyard and not just your opponent's, not only do you add the much needed recursion that the deck has, but it also gives those Charmer Link monsters a bit of added utility. The problem with the Charmer Link monsters is that they are very dependent on what your opponent is playing. For example, if you are trying to summon out something like the Wind Charmer Win, but your opponent doesn't play any wind monsters in their deck, then it is pretty much a useless card, and we don't want to play useless cards in our extra deck, so by giving it the ability to summon our own cards, we obviously play all of those attributes, and it just adds that needed utility. Now, for the second card, it's actually going to be a link despite this being an XYZ based strategy, and that card is going to be Familiar Possessed the Apprentice Charmer, and its effect is this. 1 monster with 1500 attack or defense. When this card is link summoned, you can activate or set 1 possessed spell or trap from your deck. If a possessed spell or trap is activated, quick effect, you can special summon 1 monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense events from your deck, then destroy one monster you control. You can only use each effect of Familiar Possess the Apprentice Charmer once per turn. The first thing that I want to talk about with this particular card is the fact that its summoning condition makes all of the monsters in our deck a 1-card combo. Since none of the Charmers, Familiar Possessed, or Familiars themselves have on-field effects, by being able to link into Familiar Possess the Apprentice Charmer, we're able to extend our board into a state where we will be able to conduct multiple XYZ summons. For our second talking point, we're going to talk about how this grants us access to our important possess spells or traps, which are integral to the strategy. Not a lot of cards in the game are able to get us into those, so with the ability to not only activate cards like Awakening of the Possessed or Unpossessed, which will gain us both card advantage and the ability to float respectively, but we can also get cards like Possessed Partnership, which will act as an interruption on our opponent's turn. And finally, by being able to special summon out a card when a possessed spell or trap is activated, specifically a card that has the exact statistics of all of the familiars in the game, we are able to get multiple monsters on our board to conduct XYZ summons, which again is very important to the strategy as we decided to make this an XYZ deck. Not just that, but in the case of a card like Possessed Partnership, which requires us to have multiple attributes on resolution, we can go ahead and quick effect summon a different attribute from our deck as well, which will let us perform the additional effect of Possessed Partnership. And for the third and final card, if you know anything about the Charmers and Familiar Possessed archetype, is that all of the Familiars have gotten retrains except for the Light and Dark Familiar. So for the final card, we made Detenchi, and this is going to act as both the Light and Dark Familiar, as you'll see in the effect, which is as follows. You can only control one Detenchi. If you control a spellcaster monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. While face up on the field, this card is also Light Attribute. If you would XYZ summon a rank 4 monster that requires 3 or less material, this card can be used as the entire requirement. An XYZ monster with this card as material can activate its effects as a quick effect. An XYZ monster that activates its effect by detaching 5 or less material can detach just this card instead. The most important part of Detenchi is that it shares its summoning conditions with all of the other familiar retrains. Not only can you only control one of it, as stated on all of the others as well, but as long as you control a spellcaster type monster, you are able to special summon this card from your hand, which again just adds into the ability to create XYZs during your turn. Additionally, by being able to act as the entire requirement for the summon of a rank 4, it allows you to make much more impactful monsters that you otherwise wouldn't normally be able to make. But in order to balance that, we made it for a monster that has to require 3 or less materials. And by making those monsters' effects quick effects, it also adds into the possibility of what you could possibly end your end board on. Normally something like Castel the Skyblaster Musketeer wouldn't be very good to make turn 1, but if it's a quick effect, it acts as a disruption for your opponent as well. And finally, by being able to act as the entire detach cost for an effect that would require 5 or less materials, it opens up possibilities that would not normally be accessible in the strategy and allows you to make much more powerhouse XYZ monsters that might need that little bit extra push. And do note that the reason we made it 5 or less is so that you wouldn't be able to summon a card like Ptolemaeus, which if you detach 7 is able to just skip your opponent's turn. That wouldn't be fair, that wouldn't be fun, that wouldn't be interactive, so we had to do that 5 or less in order to balance this card. And now that we know the cards that we have to work with, let's go ahead and see that best of 3 match against Kashtira. As with any game of Yu-Gi-Oh, we are going to begin with a dice roll, and as you can see here, I roll a 6 while my opponent rolls a 7, meaning that Kashtira is unfortunately going to start us off in our game 1. And also, unfortunately for me, my opponent opens the absolute nuts, opening the 3-card combo that results in 9 zone locks. That will be 5 on his turn and then 4 on mine, meaning that I only have 1 zone to work with essentially. But thankfully, due to cards like Detenchi, 1 zone is all we need because it can act as the full summon for an XYZ. So we're going to see him start off his turn by activating the Pressured Planet Wraithsoth, which will allow him to add a Kashtira from his deck to his hand, and we're going to see that he adds the Kashtira Unicorn. Because he adds the Kashtira Unicorn and has no monsters, he is then able to special summon it from his hand and use its effect, which will let him add a Kashtira spell or trap. Here we see him add the Birth, meaning that he probably already has Kashtira Theosis, and he's going to activate the Birth, and using its effect to summon a level 7 with no tributes will then normal summon the Kashtira Fenrir. Kashtira Fenrir activates its effect to add any Kashtira monster, adding the copy of Riseheart, and Riseheart is really good because it is a free special summon that will also modulate its level as a level 7 on top of banishing cards from our deck, which will allow him to lock some zones. Here he's going to overlay the Unicorn and the Fenrir to summon out his first copy of Shangri-Era, and for those of you that don't know, Shangri-Era will block a zone from being used anytime a card in my possession is banished face down. So he's going to special summon the Riseheart and activate its effect, banishing a Kashtira monster from his deck as cost to then banish the top 3 cards of my deck face down. We're going to see him send the Scareclaw Kashtira, and then I will banish the cards face down. He can then activate the Shangri-Ira, targeting one of my spell and trap zones. That zone is now no longer usable as long as Shangri-Ira remains on field. Because the Shangri-Ira activated his effect, he's also able to use the effect of the field spell to destroy a card on the field, and he is going to target his own Kashtira Shangri-Ira because he can use its effect to detach one material instead, putting the unicorn in grave, which will be very important for later. Since he used the effect of Shangri-Ira, he can cheat out an Arise Heart by using just one Kashtira as material, which we'll see him do on top of the Rise Heart, and then he activates the Theosis, targeting the Arise Heart. This is going to allow him to summon out his Kashtira Ogre from the deck. Now, this is going to activate a couple of things here, because Arise Heart is a mandatory effect. Whenever a card is banished, which all cards are being banished because it banishes all cards that leave the field, he has to attach one, and then the Theosis, because it was banished, can add back a card from banish as well, which is what we just saw. The Theosis is going to add back the Scareclaw, and the Arise Heart is going to attach the Theosis, and now we're pretty much good to go here. He's going to use the effect of Ogre to search for a trap, and that is going to search for a copy of Kashtira Big Bang. The reason Big Bang is important is because he can banish it from his hand for the summoning condition of the Scareclaw, which we just saw him add back, which when the Big Bang is banished, can special summon one of the materials attached to a Kashtira XYZ. So we're going to see him reveal the Scareclaw banishing the Big Bang, and that is exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have the Arise Heart activating as Chainlink 1 again, the Big Bang activating as Chainlink 2, targeting the Shangri-Ira. That will allow him to summon out the Fenrir and then attach the Big Bang to the Kashtira Arise Heart. Now with Kashtira having 3 materials as well, it is live on my turn. He's going to then overlay the Scareclaw and the Fenrir for his second copy of Shangri-Ira. The zone lock of Shangri-Ira is not once per turn, and then he will activate the Birth to resummon the Unicorn from the grave. He can then overlay the Unicorn and the Ogre into a copy of Mind Hacker, which will banish a extra deck monster from my extra deck face down, activating literally everything on his field, and this is where it gets wild. So we're going to see here that he's actually going to banish the number 91 Thunder Spark Dragon, which is really cool in this deck, because with a card like Detenchi, it's essentially a Zeus just for our opponent, but he's going to activate the Arise Heart as 1, Shangri as 2, Mind Hacker as 3, and Shangri as 4. That is going to then block a zone, banish 4 cards from the top of our deck face down, block another zone, and then mandatory attach a card as well. Now, the reason that this is really insane is because since more cards were banished during that chain, he's then going to be able to use both of his Shangris again, so Arise Heart Chainlink 1, Shangri 2, and 3. That is going to be able to target the remaining 2 spell and trap zones I have, meaning that my opponent is now safe from any powerhouse blowout spell traps. And as you can see, the Arise Heart has quite a bit of material, so it will be live during our turn as well, meaning that he can banish a card, and that is super threatening because when he banishes a card with Arise Heart, since it does banish it face down, he gets to lock 2 additional zones off of the Shangris, as well as 2 more additional zones after the Mind Hacker banishes more cards, activating both Shangris again. But like I said, thankfully we are able to play through as long as we have Detenchi, so I summon the Wandering Griffin Rider. Surprise, surprise, Water Enchantress has 1500 attack, meaning we can actually search it with Familiars Possessed, and the point of summoning the Wandering Griffin Rider was to try and bait the Arise Heart. But we did play some practice games beforehand just to make sure that everything worked as intended, so my opponent does know the importance of Detenchi, meaning that he's going to hold his Arise Heart for the Detenchi here, and that is exactly what's going to happen. He does take some time to figure out what materials he's going to detach, but ultimately does banish the Detenchi face down, which will activate all of his effects once more, meaning 2 of the Shangri-Iras will block 2 of my zones. The Mind Hacker will banish more cards from the top of my deck face down, actually 9 cards, meaning that I now have 18 cards from my main deck banished face down, and because those cards were banished face down as part of that chain, in a new chain, both Shangris will activate one more time, blocking out 2 more zones, meaning that I have 9 zones locked, 1 main monster zone available, which is currently being taken up by the Wandering Griffin Rider. That is pretty much going to seal the game, but as if that wasn't bad enough, you can see here while building his chain links, he also has the ability to summon the Fenrir off of the Big Bang, as well as add the Rise Heart back to his hand off the Kashtira Theosis, and that is going to pretty much seal the game for me. There's not anything else that I can do, so we're going to go ahead and just scoop this game. We'll go ahead and go to game 2 for you guys, and hopefully we can show you a bit more of a powerhouse combo that the Charmers are now able to do with the new support. Since we lost game 1, that means that going into game 2, we are going to be able to elect to go first, putting us at a huge advantage because as long as we're able to see pretty much any monster in our deck, that is going to be the 1-card full combo as outlined in the card breakdown. So you're going to see here that we're going to start off our turn by activating a copy of Spirit Charmers, which what Spirit Charmers does is you discard 1 card, and then you can add or set 1 familiar spell or trap and 1 familiar possessed monster. So we're going to discard the Ranryu, and the goal here is to set a card like Awakening of the Possessed and add a familiar possessed monster for us to normal summon, meaning the Awakening Possessed will give us card advantage because we draw when we summon, but unfortunately my opponent does have the Ash Blossom. With only 3 cards left in hand, we better have a card that we can normal summon, and thankfully that is exactly what we have. We are going to normal summon Win the Wind Charmer. Since that is going to be the full combo, we're going to link away the Win the Wind Charmer into the familiar Possess the Apprentice Charmer, which will be able to activate its effect on summon. This will activate us a copy of Unpossessed from our deck, and that will then proc the second effect of familiar Possess the Apprentice Charmer. Because a possessed spell or trap was activated, we can special summon a monster from our deck and then destroy a monster that we control. Now this is the Wombo combo that I was hoping to show you guys. We can special summon the Gigabyte and then pop the Gigabyte because nothing prevents us from popping the monster that we summoned, and that activates both Unpossessed and Gigabyte. Gigabyte will then summon any of the other familiars because it summons a monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense, giving us access to our Detenchi, and the Unpossessed will summon a familiar possessed monster that has a different attribute than the monster destroyed. Here we're going to summon the Hida, specifically in the zone that the possessed or the Charmer Link monster points to, which will be important for summoning the familiar's possessed XYZ monster. So here what we're going to do is we consider summoning out the familiar possessed monster first. You'll see that we overlay the Hida and the Charmer, but then we decide we are going to go for some safety net first. So instead we are going to overlay the Detenchi, using it as the 3 materials required to summon out a copy of Ptolemaeus. We can then activate Ptolemaeus' effect, detaching just the Detenchi, again thanks to the Detenchi effect, to rank it up into a copy of Cyber Dragon Nova, which we can then slap a Cyber Dragon Infinity on top of, meaning that we have an Omni Negate for our end board as well, and protecting us from some other hand traps that our opponent might have. Now we're going to overlay the Hida and the Apprentice Charmer into a copy of Familiar's Possessed, which we can then activate its effect to search for a monster with 1500 attack or defense. As stated in Game 1, we didn't realize when we made it, but the Water Enchantress of the Temple happens to be a monster with 1500 attack, meaning that we can go ahead and add it here, which we will then activate it to add us a copy of Rite of Aramesir. Now this is going to allow us to end on an additional Omni Negate on top of the Cyber Dragon Infinity, because once we activate this Rite of Aramesir, we are going to summon out the Adventure token and activate the Fateful Adventure from our deck, which you're going to see here, and once we have the Fateful Adventure, we can then use that to search for the copy of Wandering Griffin Rider and special summon it since we control the Adventure token. But before we search, we're actually going to do something a little cheeky here. We did hard open a copy of Detenchi, so we're going to go ahead and special summon the Detenchi here before using the search of the Fateful Adventure. The reason that's important is once a monster is special summoned, the Fateful Adventure can then add the Dracoback equip spell from the deck to our hand, meaning that we have the discard fodder that we need for our search on the Wandering Griffin Rider. So we're going to activate the Fateful Adventure here. This is going to search out the Wandering Griffin Rider, and again we will discard the Dracoback that we just added. That will then activate the effect of Dracoback in Graveyard to equip it to an Adventure token, meaning that we don't lose out on any card advantage, and we also now have a protected token from battle. On resolution, we are going to go ahead and summon the Wandering Griffin Rider. Now we have 2 Omni Negates, but that's not the end of our board. We do still have a Detenchi on the field, meaning that we're going to be able to overlay it into a copy of Thunder Spark Dragon. Now Thunder Spark Dragon, now being a quick effect and being able to detach the Detenchi, can Zeus just our opponent as well, but to end our turn, we're also going to play the Charmer Field spell, which will negate the first monster effect that our opponent activates, meaning that our end board is 2 Omni Negates, a Monster Negate, and a Zeus, as well as Recursion with the Unpossessed, and if the Familiar's Possessed remains on field, we can search again during our next turn to just do the full combo again by grabbing our last copy of Detenchi. Our opponent's going to start off by using the Infinite Impermanence to negate the effect of Cyber Dragon Infinity, but I want to leave the Infinity not negated because it does gain attack for each material it has, so that's a little relevant. I do negate the Infinite Impermanence with the Wandering Griffin Rider. Not really sure if that mattered because, I mean, if he turns off a negate, he turns off a negate. It ends on the same essential board for my opponent. I'm down 1 negate, so he's only got 1 more Omni Negate to worry about, and we're going to see here he's going to activate the Pressured Planet Wraithsoth. The Wraithsoth is going to allow him to add any Kashtira monster from his deck to his hand. Typically that's going to be either the Unicorn or the Fenrir. Let's see what my opponent goes for in this instance. We're going to see here that he actually adds the copy of Fenrir. That leads me to believe that he's probably got something like Birth or Theosis already in his hand, and he wants to be able to put the Fenrir on board to not only put the pressure of banishing my cards, but also putting the pressure of if I activate a card on resolution, he can banish a card as well. But we do see that he already opened the Unicorn, so he's going to special summon out the Unicorn here, and then he's going to activate the Forbidden Lance before using its effect. Now, the reason that's really cool is because that makes Unicorn unaffected by spells and traps, so when he activates the effect of the Unicorn, my field spell will attempt to negate it, but since the Unicorn is now unaffected, the effect gets to resolve, and he essentially got to play around the field spell without losing out on any of his monster effects. Now, technically, I could still negate the Unicorn with something like my Cyber Dragon Infinity, but the reason I refrain from doing that is because Cyber Dragon Infinity will negate and destroy, and since we know he already has the Fenrir in his hand, if we negate and destroy the Unicorn, he will then control no monsters, meaning that he's able to just special summon out the Fenrir, putting my board in a very, very bad position as well. So he's going to resolve the Unicorn instead, and that means he's going to get to add either the Birth or the Theosis. Those are the only two Kashtira spells. He looks at his hand to see what he actually needs, and he's going to elect to add, if I remember correctly, the Theosis. Now, the Theosis is really, really important because he is then able to extend his board even further, because now I have a choice to make. I can either negate the Theosis here, or I can let it go through and try to nuke the board with the Thunder Spark Dragon. But before activating the Theosis, my opponent uses the enemy controller, tributing out the Unicorn to target my Cyber Dragon Infinity to take control of it, which I have to negate. There's no way I'm letting him take control of my Cyber Dragon Infinity. Then he special summons out the Fenrir because he has no monsters on board, and before he can do anything, because I know he has the Theosis, I'm going to use the Thunder Spark Dragon to destroy all cards my opponent controls, getting rid of the Pressure Planet Wraithsoth and the Fenrir, and now I'm hoping that the Theosis is all my opponent has left, because if he has anything else, I am in a very bad position. But we see that that is all he has. He passes turn and I draw. Here we are going to then use the effect of the Fateful Adventure to add us back our Wandering Griffin Rider. We want to put an additional negate up as soon as possible. We don't know what's left in our opponent's hand, so he could have something else on top of the Theosis. We're going to discard the Gigabyte, we're going to special summon out the Wandering Griffin Rider, move our adventure token to attack, and that is going to seal the game. And now we're going into game 3, and if you are as hyped as I am, make sure you smash that like button, because if you told me a week ago that we would be going into game 3 against Kashtira, which is widely considered the best deck in the game at the moment, with a deck like Charmers, I would not have believed you. So this is only possible due to the Make It Meta cards. So you guys know the deal. Make sure to absolutely destroy the like button. We're going to see my opponent start off with a Pressured Planet Wraithsoth, and here he's going to add a copy of Unicorn, which could potentially be a misplay for him. We were able to see his hand a little bit on camera. He already has the Theosis and the Birth, meaning that something like Fenrir would have been a lot better of a search, but my opponent probably has a game plan. Here he's going to go ahead and special summon out the Unicorn and activate the Unicorn effect, which will allow him to search another spell. Now he's probably gonna go for something like Birth, that way, oh no, he does actually go for Theosis. So the reason I said he might go for something like Birth is that way he has an additional Birth for the follow-up on the next turn, but I'm guessing he just wants the Theosis here because he's probably not gonna activate the Birth this turn. If I was my opponent, the route that I would want to take in a game 3 is to probably just do the typical Arise Heart pass board, because he doesn't know, maybe I sided in something like Nibiru's and he doesn't want to play into that. He doesn't want to go for a Wombo combo. He's going to activate the effect of the Kashtira Theosis, targeting the Unicorn, and this is going to allow him to summon a different attribute Kashtira from his deck, more than likely going to be the Fenrir, because since he didn't search the Fenrir off of the Wraithsoth, he kind of needs it now so he can grab his copy of Rise Heart. So we see the Fenrir hit the field, and then he's going to be able to activate the Fenrir effect to then search for another monster. He's probably going to go for something like the Rise Heart, again, probably going for the Arise Heart pass route, which is exactly what happens. He searches out the Arise Heart, and now he can go ahead and special summon that because he controls Kashtira monsters. So now with the Arise Heart hitting the field here, he is going to need to level modulate it to make it a 7. He's going to activate the effect, and this is going to allow him to banish a Kashtira card from his deck, and then banish the top 3 cards of my deck face down. Unfortunately, since there isn't a Shangri-Ira on field, he's not going to be able to block a zone, but that doesn't really matter. We're going to see here he banishes the Fenrir. We know he has the Birth in his hand, so that's probably his guaranteed follow-up for the next turn, and he is doing exactly what I expected. He's going to be making the 3 material Arise Heart, which is going to put us under a macrocosmo-like effect, as well as pressuring a once per turn banish face down, and he's going to back all of that up with the 2 infinite impermanences that we can see in his hand, so that is a pretty hefty board for us to deal with. We are under macro, we have a quick effect banish, and we have 2 monster negates. Is that enough to stop us? Can we play through it? We're gonna have to see. So we're going to draw for turn, and the first thing that we're going to do is activate our copy of Water Enchantress, as you're going to see here in just a moment. Now this is really cool because this potentially can out our opponent's entire board. Because the effect of Dracoback can bounce a card, that means that we can get rid of the Arise Heart, which is essentially 2 big issues out of the way. We're going to get out of our macro-like effect, as well as getting rid of the once per turn banish. Now, unfortunately, we do forget the mandatory effect of the Arise Heart to attach some cards, so we're not going to resolve that until a little bit later, but you'll see here that I summon the token and activate the Fateful. Once the right goes to the graveyard, or the banish rather, that is when we remember the mandatory effect, and we start attaching the cards to the Arise Heart. I just give him the Water Enchantress. He didn't even say he wanted the Water Enchantress. That's my fault. So he does tell me that he actually doesn't want the Water Enchantress and he wants to get one of my face down banish, just so that he can get some knowledge. So we swap that out, because again, I shouldn't have assumed that he wanted that card, and we can see here that one of the cards banished off of the Rise Heart was an Ash Blossom, and then because the right went to grave as well, he can attach an additional card as well, seeing that it is the Spirit Charmer. So now he has a 5 material Arise Heart here. We're going to attempt to activate the effect of our Fateful Adventure here, and I believe he's going to be forced to then banish it with the Arise Heart, making sure that we're not able to get not only our Omni Negate, but also not able to get our bounce. We're going to see that my opponent takes a little bit of time to determine what cards he's actually detaching for the Arise Heart effect. It realistically shouldn't matter, but I mean, maybe he's got an idea in mind. We're ultimately going to see that he detaches my Ash Blossom as well as 2 of his cards, the Rise Heart and I believe the Unicorn here. And then he will be able to activate the effect of the Arise Heart as well to attach one of the banished materials. He's going to reattach the Rise Heart, and that realistically shouldn't matter, but again, maybe he's got a game plan. We're going to see that I follow up with the Spirit Charmers, discarding a copy of the Possessed Partnerships from my hand. This will allow me to add and set both a Possessed Spell Trap or a familiar Possessed monster. I believe it's actually a monster with 1500 defense. So here we're going to see that one of the cards is going to be the Awakening of the Possessed, and the other one is going to be a copy of Asa the Earth Charmer. Now we're going to opt to set the Awakening Possessed because we can just activate it, meaning that when we normal summon out the Asa, we will be able to get a draw as well. So he is going to activate the effect of the Arise Heart on resolution as well to suck up another material. Here he's going to reattach his Unicorn. Ignore the Asa on the field, that's technically in my hand. I was just having it revealed as a card that was added as well. So we're going to put the Asa back in our hand, and that means that we should in theory have full combo, because as you saw in game 2, any one of our monsters can go into the new Link monster that we made, and that will get us into pretty much everything that we need. So before we normal summon out the Asa, we are going to then activate the copy of Awakening of the Possessed, and that means when we summon out this Asa, as stated earlier, we do get a draw card. So we're going to offer a cut to our opponent before drawing. We realized that we searched and didn't offer him the cut, and now what we're hoping to draw into is something like another familiar monster that can just freely special summon itself, because in this scenario, the more monsters the better. We hard opened the Detenchi, and because of that, we can just special summon it before doing anything else, and that will potentially get us exactly where we need to go. The thought process here is that with our opponent's Arise Heart down, since he already used the banish effect, if we can clear the board, we are free to go. So we overlay the Detenchi into a copy of Thunder Spark Dragon and activate its effect to attempt to destroy all of the cards our opponent controls, but unfortunately it is met by an infinite impermanence. So now we don't know what the last card is. It could be another imperm because we just saw the imperm. It could potentially be the enemy controller because we saw that in game 2 as well. We know it's the imperm because we saw him set it, but in the game we don't know. So now we have to play a little more conservatively, and I believe the only other option here, oh actually no, we opened up another familiar, meaning that we have more options to summon as well. Here what we're going to do then after we summon the Gigabyte is we are going to special summon a copy of Inari Fire, and we were absolutely loaded with all of these familiars. As long as we had a spellcaster, we were set to go. So we're going to go ahead and summon out the copy of Familiar Possess the Apprentice Charmer, and we are going to attempt the effect, but we are met by another impermanence, negating the effect to then activate the Unpossessed. Thankfully though, because of the alternative summoning condition on the Familiar's Possessed XYZ monster, since we summoned the Inari Fire in the zone that the Apprentice Charmer points to, we are able to then go ahead and make it anyway. We do kind of mess up a little bit because we're getting a little excited. We do have all the potential in the world to win this game against Kashtira with Charmers, and we accidentally attempt to overlay both the Gigabyte and the Inari into the Familiar's Possessed, realizing that we can't because it does require a Spellcaster monster, so we quickly take that back, and like I said, because the Inari Fire was being pointed to by the Apprentice Charmer, we are still able to make it using the Familiar's Possessed alternative summoning condition. So by overlaying the Inari and the Apprentice Charmer, we are able to summon out our copy of Familiar's Possessed, meaning that we are able to get some additional searches as well. We're going to activate the effect of the Familiar's Possessed, detaching the Inari Fire, accidentally putting it engraved, but we quickly rectify that, and this is going to search us a copy of Detenchi, which can, of course, special summon itself because we control a Spellcaster with the Familiar's Possessed. He's going to attach the Inari Fire, not that that really matters, but we are going to then special summon out our Detenchi. And as you can see, we were actually just loaded because we special summon out the Ranryu here, meaning that we can actually do something pretty cool. We're able to overlay the Ranryu and the Detenchi into a copy of Raider's Knight, and detaching the Ranryu, we can go ahead and rank that up into a copy of Arc Rebellion XYZ Dragon, which will be able to negate the effect of the Arise Heart, as well as pump itself up by the attack of all monsters on field. So we're going to detach the Detenchi here because we have to have a Dark XYZ in order to get the negate effect, and we're trying to figure out the damage here. Now, I've done the math after the fact. We didn't do it in the game because it was just ridiculous. We have attack modifiers with both the Awakening of the Possessed and the Pressure Planet Wraithsoth. That puts this Arc Rebellion up to a whopping 20,150 attack. We're going to go ahead and swing over the Arise Heart. My opponent's going to take the Xyz materials and kind of sort through them because he's got some of mine and some of his. Unfortunately, since we used the effect of Arc Rebellion, it was the only monster able to attack that turn. Otherwise, we could have potentially gone for game, but we were able to clear the board. Now, with only 2 cards left in our opponent's hand, they better have something good. We, as the viewers, know what they are because we were able to see his hand. We know that they are Birth and Theosis, but in the actual game, we do not know. So now our opponent has to have something that can out a 20,000 attack monster, as well as also get rid of the rest of our board as well, which will be relatively difficult because the Awakening of the Possessed is pumping everything up by, I believe, an additional 1,200, because it's 300 for every different attribute. So now we're considering using the effect of the Familiar's Possessed to get another search, but there really isn't any reason to. We don't have anything left in our extra deck that would matter making another rank 4, so instead we are going to just go ahead and pass it on to our opponent. Again, they have the Birth with the Banished Fenrir, which is absolutely insane follow-up, but in the game we don't actually know. We did take quite a bit of time there to actually figure out the attack of the Arc Rebellion, which is what's taking so long without any moves, but our opponent's going to draw for turn, and it is going to be another copy of Theosis. Unfortunately for us, our opponent has the 3 best cards in their deck in their hand, so they're going to activate another copy of Pressured Planet Wraithsoth, allowing them another search, and because he's already got the Birth and the Theosis, what better card for him to add than something like a Kashtira Ogre, because that will get him access to the Big Bang that he has not yet seen. So we're going to see if that's what he's going to do, but that would be my line of play in this scenario as well. There's nothing on my field that he has to worry about. All of my effects are spent. The only thing he has is the 20,150 attack Arc Rebellion. So he does get the Ogre, and he's going to go ahead and special summon it, and then he's going to probably activate the Birth from his hand. Here he can use the effect of Birth. This is going to allow him to resummon out the copy of Fenrir from his banish. He does actually also have one in his grave, so he can summon either one. It realistically doesn't matter, but once he puts the Fenrir on the field, not only does that threaten my Arc Rebellion by being able to banish it, but that also allows him to search for another Kashtira monster as well. And since he has the Birth on his field, it doesn't matter what he adds, he can just go ahead and normal summon it. So we're actually going to see a really smart play by my opponent here. He's going to add the Scareclaw Kashtira, which we will get to a little bit later, because my opponent realizes he hasn't yet used the effect of Ogre, which he is going to do now, to add him a copy of Big Bang. And now the reason adding the Scareclaw was a smart decision is because my opponent still has a copy of Theosis in his graveyard, meaning that here when he special summons out the copy of Scareclaw, he can use the effect of Theosis to then add back the Fenrir that is in his banished, and since he has the Birth, he can normally normal summon that without tributes. By doing this play rather than grabbing something like a unicorn, he's able to end his board with one additional material, which is going to pay off immensely moving on into the rest of this turn. So we're going to see here he's going to normal summon out the Fenrir using the effect of the Birth to do so without tributing, and my opponent misread Fenrir. Even though the summon is not once per turn, the search is. Because he didn't realize that, he was going to attempt to search a second time off of his Fenrir. I told him that it was in fact the summon that is not once per turn, the search is once per turn, so instead he's going to take the Fenrir and the Scareclaw, and he's going to use them to perform an XYZ summon going into the Dark Armed XYZ. The Dark Armed XYZ is actually incredibly impactful in this game state. Although the Arc Rebellion is not able to be destroyed by card effect, everything else on my field is, and he does have the Fenrir to banish the Arc Rebellion face down. So the Dark Armed is actually going to be able to destroy 2 of my cards because it is not a once per turn effect. So we're going to see him activate the first one here, and that is going to destroy my Familiar's Possessed XYZ monster, meaning that's 1 less material that he has to worry about and 1 less search that I'm going to have on my turn as well. He's going to go ahead and banish a card from his grave as he has to on the second part of the effect, and here he's going to banish the Scareclaw. He'll then be able to activate the Dark Armed a second time, and this time he's going to use it to destroy my token, because the token is in attack position and it is gaining a decent number of attack based on the Awakening Possess as well, so that's the card that he really wants to get rid of. Now my opponent can go ahead and go to battle phase, and I believe he's going to swing into the Gigabyte with the Fenrir here. Before deciding on what he wants to attack, we are figuring out the attack of all of the cards currently on field, because again, they are gaining a boost from the Awakening Possessed. He wants to make sure that he targets the correct thing, because since the Thunderspark Dragon is an attack, he could very well end up destroying his own monster if he were to attack into it. So once we're able to determine the values, he swings into the Gigabyte with the Fenrir, activating the Fenrir effect to then banish the Arc Rebellion face down, being able to get rid of the monstrous 20,000 attack. But I do get to activate my Gigabyte, which will be able to special summon a monster with 1500 attack and 200 defense from the deck, meaning that we won't be left wide open, but we will be in a relatively bad position. Now, with less monsters on my field, obviously the Thunderspark Dragon is gaining even less attack as well. Once this monster hits the field, which we summon the Ranryu, the Thunderspark Dragon will only be at 3000 attack, and thanks to the Pressured Planet Wraithsoth, that leaves my opponent's Kashtira Ogre at 3300 attack. So he will be able to actually run it over with the Ogre, leaving me with no cards in hand and just a Ranryu on my board. Now, don't forget that we do also know that my opponent still has the Kashtira Theosis in his hand as well, meaning that once we go into main phase 2, he will be able to use it to get an additional monster on board. And that is exactly what we see here. He activates the Kashtira Theosis, targeting the Kashtira Ogre, meaning he can summon anything but a water. This will allow him to summon out a copy of Kashtira Unicorn, which he can then also use to add his third and final copy of Kashtira Theosis from his deck to his hand, guaranteeing the follow-up on his next turn if this doesn't just spell disaster for us already. But with 3 level 7s left on board, he will be able to overlay all of them into another copy of Arise Heart, meaning not only are we back under the Macrocosmo-like effect with all cards being banished, but he is also going to have a quick effect banish as well, and with no cards in hand and just relying on our top deck, it really doesn't seem like we're in that good of a position. But to add insult to injury, he also has that copy of Big Bang that we're seeing, so he is going to set that before ending his turn, meaning that not only can he get rid of one of our cards, but he can also pseudo-evenly match us. He passes his turn and we draw. It better be something crazy. I don't think there's literally anything that can get this back from us. We check our graveyard before revealing that the card we drew was the Wandering Griffin Rider, and that's game for our opponent. And there you guys have it. Unfortunately, Charmers were not able to win this one, despite the absolutely broken cards that we gave them. Now, these cards were actually more broken than I even wanted to give a deck in this series, but we really needed to do that in order to make it even able to attempt to compete, and I think that says a lot about the power creep of Yu-Gi-Oh! We gave this deck 1-card starters, multiple searches per turn, a monster that can not only summon really powerful XYZs, but also make their effects quick effects and use itself as the entire cost to activate its effect, and that's just really really insane that even with all of that, we weren't able to compete with Kashtira, but that is the allure of this series, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, maybe consider supporting me on Patreon, and always comment down below what you guys want to see in the Make It Meta series. I already have a list of decks that I want to go through, but this is a series that I would like to keep running for as long as possible, so again, comment those down below what decks you would like to see. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.